Hello class, this is your instructor Alec Rogers, and today we're going to be discussing Intro to the Pacemaker. As you all have varying degrees of backgrounds and experiences, this lesson will be distinguished as we know that you have a basic understanding of anatomy of the heart, which is right here, and we are going to be discussing the very basics of a pacemaker. Let's get started. There'll be 3 questions about the pacemaker in this course. What is a pacemaker? What are the functions, and how are the functions achieved? We are going to be talking about these 3 questions in 2 separate manners. One of what is a pacemaker, the first section, is going to be dwelling into the first question here, and that is going to be recognition. We're going to be able to recognize what a pacemaker is and the components that make it up in this lesson. The second is going to be what are the functions and how are these functions achieved. We are going to go more into depth of not only what is a pacemaker, but how it works. We're going to distinguish pacing and sensing. We will get into that. So what is a pacemaker? A pacemaker is a medical device that regulates a patient's heart rate. The device regulates the heart rate by sending an electric current into the heart tissue. A pacemaker system is implanted into the patient's body surgically. The pacemaker system is made up of 2 components. There are 2 components in every pacemaker, the can and the leads. The first component is the can. The can is the brain of the device that sits underneath the patient's skin in their chest. The can is programmed directly to alter the electric current of the heart. That is the device that you see on a patient. We will see, and you will be touching when you're working a pacemaker. That is what you're seeing is the can. The second component are the leads. The leads are wires that are inserted through a vein, and we will discuss in a further lesson which vein and what are the different methods, but they are inserted only through a vein, not an artery, and they are attached directly into the heart tissue. The leads are the bridge to how the device interacts with the heart. There are several varieties of both cans and leads that we are going to discuss. Pacemaker cans. There are both single-chamber and dual-chamber pacemaker cans. A single-chamber pacemaker has only one lead and will only sense and pace the bottom chamber of the heart. A dual-chamber device has 2 leads and will sense and pace both bottom and top chambers of the heart. Both dual and single chambers devices are beneficial and implanted every day across the world. The arrows right here show where they're inserted. As you can see, this is a single chamber in the can. This is what we call a header. You put the one lead right in there. And in here we have same device, but instead there are 2 ports for the atrial lead in the top and the ventricular lead in the bottom. Now let's talk about leads. There are both passive and active leads. A passive lead right here, as you can see by the circle, does not have a screw attached to it. Instead, it has tines that hook under the heart tissue. Those are demonstrated right there. Passive leads are implanted in patients that are older or sicker with weaker heart muscles. As is imperative, a hole is not poked into the heart. Unfortunately, if a hole is poked into the heart, we have a whole list of complications, one including fatality. Active leads have a helix screw at the end of them. As you can see there, instead of the tines, we have an actual metal screw, which screws into the patient's heart tissue. Active leads are more commonly used because they have a greater chance of staying in place once implanted. The passive leads had a greater chance of dislodging, but both leads are implanted today, and it is important to know the difference. And to fix a dislodged lead, we have to go back into surgery. So it is very important we do not do that if we can avoid it. Pacemaker implantation. So in this section is just the basic value of how you implant it. This is a diagram of how the pacemaker system looks. The image shows the patient was planted with a dual chamber pacemaker. The first active lead is implanted and screwed into the right ventricle, as we can see, following the blue vein down into the heart tissue, into the right ventricle. The second lead is directly connected into the right atrium, or we like to really put them into, be more specific, the right atrial appendage and the right ventricular apex. To connect the leads to the can, the implanter will use a wrench to secure the leads. So in that header, as we go back, you will see there is a hole right in this area, and here is a better view, right here and here. They use a helix screw, which we will be discussing later, to screw it in to make sure that it's tight. Okay, so we've discussed what a can is and a lead. You'll be having to know what an active can or an active lead is, a passive lead, a single chamber can, and a dual chamber can. The next section, which we're going to be doing, is distinguishing the functions of a pacemaker. This is what the functions of a pacemaker are. The goal of a pacemaker is to prevent the heart from going too slow. Patients will receive a pacemaker if their heart rate is dangerously low, as a low heart rate can lead to syncope or death. The pacemaker prevents this from happening through two functions. First, the device will sense the intrinsic or natural heart rate of the patient. If it is too low, the device will start to pace the heart at a faster rate to prevent the above negative side effects from happening. Function, sensing. This is, in my opinion, the most important slide. The crux of all pacing really has to deal with sensing. A pacemaker senses a patient's own intrinsic heart rate. Sensing is how a device sees what it needs to do. The ability to sense in the device is called the device's eyes. If the device cannot see, it will not work correctly, period. When the device is implanted, the doctor will test the sensing of the device first, and most importantly, to make sure the implant will be successful. The next is what we all know about is pacing. This section will discuss the function of pacing. The pacemaker paces a heart if it's going too slow. This means it will actively make the heart beat faster through the combination of the can and the leads. However, this function only works if the device is correctly sensing. Remember, without sensing, the pacing function is useless. So how are these functions achieved? Let's talk about sensing. The leads in the pacemaker are implanted directly into the patient's heart. Once the leads are inside the heart, they are screwed into the heart tissue to give a device a good signal. A passive lead is not screwed in. Instead, it hooks onto the heart tissue, which we call trabeculi, with tines to give the device a good signal. Every time the heart beats, it creates a signal that the pacemaker can see through the leads. The leads sense the heart signals, and then it sends that information to the can. So now let's talk about pacing. How is it achieved? Once sensing is achieved, remember that is the most important and first step. Once it is achieved, then the can determine if the heart rate is too slow. The can will tell the leads to start pacing the heart. The pacemaker is able to pace by sending an electrical current from the can to the leads, which will stimulate the heart tissue. To pace, the can needs to send enough electrical current through the leads to contract the heart. Every patient's heart is different, so the device needs to adapt the electrical current for each patient. We will get into that later, but that is what we call threshold. So let's do a quick summary. This presentation wanted to aim three questions. What is a pacemaker? We know that is the pacemaker is a medical device that controls the heart. The second question is, what is the functions of the pacemaker? The pacemaker senses the heart. If the rate is going too slow, then the pacemaker will pace. Third question is, how are these functions achieved? A pacemaker senses the heart rate by sending electrical signals on the heart, or signals on the lead. If the leads detect a slow heart rate, then the can tells the leads to pace or increase the heart rate. Okay, so next we are going to have a quiz that will be sent to you, as you can see on your computers at home. This will be sent to you through Medtronic Academy, and it is a 10-question quiz. There will be 6 questions that are multiple choice, and these questions are going to be the cans and the leads. It says cans. We're going to go ahead and change that to cans and leads. This is going to be asking you about the active and passive leads that we talked about, as well as single and dual chamber questions. You need to be able to recognize these. There'll be a little bit harder pictures that you can see, but know what we discussed in here and you'll be fine. The second is a critical thinking portion, which is the essay. This is going to be going into the device functions. There's 4 questions. There's going to be 2 device questions on sensing and 2 device questions on pacing. As you know how I feel, sensing is the most important, but you need to know them both. Well, class, please email me at the email below if you have any questions, and as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.